Hi, I'm Kaleigh Brendle. I'm the founder and president of Judy's League, and you're listening to White Canes Connect.
Hey there, PA Federationists. Welcome to another episode of White Canes Connect, presented by the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. My name is David Goldstein. I am your first vice president. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. And we have someone who many of you are going to be familiar with. We're going to be speaking to Kaleigh Brendle, who is a recent Villanova University graduate. She is this close to making her final selection for law school in the fall, but primarily we are going to talk about Judy's League. It is a cross-disability advocacy organization that she founded to combat the mounting challenges to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 504 states that any organization that takes federal funding must provide accessibility services and protect against discrimination. And right now it's being challenged in court in Texas versus Kennedy, and we'll talk about that. We'll also talk, on a lighter note, if you stay to the end, you'll hear her talk about how everything came about in the Who Are We NFB song, which she does the vocals of. So stick around. Let's listen to Kaleigh Brendle tell us about Judy's League. Kaleigh, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I know that a lot of folks know you, but for those who don't, why don't you give a little background on yourself?
So I am a current student at the Louisiana Center for the Blind in Ruston. I graduated from Villanova University in May, and I am on a pre-law track. I will be beginning my law school journey in August of 2026. I'm also the founder and president of Judy's League.
So a few things to unpack there. Villanova, not too far from where I'm talking to you from today. In Swarthmore, where are you going to be attending law school?
So I am still making that decision. Law schools take their sweet time a little bit with notifications of either acceptance or rejection. But I am very honored to have been accepted to UC Berkeley Law, which was one of my dream schools. It's a wonderful area to pursue a disability rights focus, which is what I want to do. I am going to be going out there in a few weeks for Admitted Students Weekend, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
So would you say you're leaning there, even if some other places that you applied to come through?
Yeah, I think I am, because coupled with a wonderful program plus a lot of disability law firms in that area, there is one other dream school that I'm waiting to hear back from. But if I don't hear back from them, I think it's going to be Berkeley.
You mentioned Judy's League. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so Judy's League is an organization I founded in response to some attacks on disability rights that began occurring in late 2024, particularly against Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. So Judy's League is a cross-disability organization, right? So you have organizations like the National Federation of the Blind or the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which do incredible work, but they are specific to one disability. We want to kind of advocate across the board. So we're a task force of people of any ability status, and we're dedicated to spreading awareness about the attacks on disability rights at both the state and federal level, because a lot has been going on, but a lot of people outside the community don't necessarily know what's at risk, what's happening, and what they can be doing about it. And so our goal is to dispense plain information, plain language, communications about what's happening on social media, to reach out to reporters, to reach out to elected officials, and see if we can kind of stop this trajectory from continuing on the road that it's on right now.
So you mentioned 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973. So that in itself, 1973 was not yesterday. And it's the one thing that to me is troubling, just coming off Washington seminar at the end of January, the fact that we have to continually bring up the Rehab Act of 1973, IDEA, and things like that, the Randolph-Shepard Act, which is celebrating its 90th year this year, is a big issue that we have to go back. These are victories we already had, and now some of them are being chipped away. Why don't you tell us what's going on?
Well, first of all, I have a lot of empathy for that, and I have a lot of similar frustrations. This should have been an open shut case. 70 million Americans identify as disabled, and 7.5 million American children are disabled, right? This is a large population. Everyone knows somebody that either has a 504 plan or uses ADA accommodations. This affects a lot of people, and we need to not be going backward. So, Judy Heumann, who is the disability rights activist that Judy's League is named in honor of, she was instrumental in getting Section 504 passed. And now, all these decades later, we have a lawsuit called Texas v. Kennedy, where originally it was 17 states that were challenging the constitutionality of Section 504. Now, thankfully, we've gotten it down to 9, but the challenge to a part of the law that is very important still stands. So originally, the 17 states were asking the court to strike down Section 504 completely. We're saying in their complaint, in writing, this law is unconstitutional. Now, the community raised their voices. There was a lot of backlash to that. So they've changed it to say, okay, we don't want to strike the entire law down. We just have a problem with this sentence about disabled people receiving services in the most integrated setting. So the issue there, right, is that that's not a small challenge. Integration is critical. And that sentence does not just appear in 504. It appears verbatim in the Americans with Disabilities Act. You have the least restrictive environment concept, which mirrors that, which shows up in the IDEA. So although it might seem like a small thing that they're chipping away at, it really isn't. We cannot afford to go back to a pre-504 era. And the troubling part, too, is that what's been happening is we've been getting a lot of joint status reports in this case, which means the plaintiff, which is the states, and the defense, which in this case is the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level, they agree on these claims. So that we really can't afford to have that situation where both sides are agreeing that this crucial part of 504 needs to go.
Let's back up just a second. Why don't you tell us 504 in general says what?
504 says that if you receive federal funding, you cannot discriminate based on disability. You need to make your services, your programs accessible. That could mean infrastructure, physically. That could mean you can't refuse service to a disabled person. That could take a lot of different forms. But that law was the stepping stone on which the ADA and IDEA were built, right? We also see it in the more popular sense in 504 plans. A lot of disabled students will have 504 plans in school that allow them to get the accommodations for things like ADHD or, other conditions like that. I know for me personally, that was the wake-up call for someone close to me as I was explaining this lawsuit to my senior thesis advisor. And he was like, oh my goodness, 2 of my 3 children have 504 plans. And that is such a common experience, right? That people don't realize, oh my gosh, if this chips away at a 504 plan or now an IEP, that's going to start affecting me. But in answer to your question more directly, right, it specifically ties to recipients of federal funding, but it can, accessibility can look a variety of different ways, as we both know.
We're saying that it goes beyond education, though. Is that correct? It's any governmental agency, whether it's local, state, they have to, if they get federal funds, they've got to provide the accommodations. Like if a county gets federal funds, they have to make sure that they are giving these accommodations to folks, whether it is some sort of training or some sort of evaluation, things like that.
Yeah, so essentially, as soon as you get a drop of federal money, you are under the watchful eye of 504.
With Judy's League, what was the impetus that kind of finally made you say, hey, this is just crazy. I've got to do something about it. Was there one thing or were there multiple things?
Truthfully, it was reading the complaint in the original lawsuit. I was recommended or I was encouraged to do that by my advisor. And I was shell shocked by what I saw. And my advisor had also given me a link to a presentation prepared by the Disability Rights Education and Defense Fund, which is another fantastic organization doing valuable work on this right now. And they talked about what was going on. And after reading both that and the complaint itself, I was serving on the National Association of Blind Students board at the time. And I went back and explained to the board and to the advocacy committee that I was chairing, we are in a really difficult spot. And there's a lot that needs to happen right now because this complaint is no joke. And so when I read that, I kept thinking if Judy Human were still with us, she would be, there's no words, she would be so angry to see that her baby, the law, that she organized all of these protests, all these sit-ins in order to get enacted, that they're coming after it so ruthlessly.
I think one of the troubling things in general is that when you have something and they say, well, it's just one line, and then that gets taken away, and then, oh, okay, we got that. Then let's go after this line, and then more rights go away. Would you say that's true?
I'd say it's definitely a concern. We've seen a really troubling trend because when I first started Judy's League, to be honest, I thought it was going to be a one issue initiative. I thought we were just going to be tackling 504. And then all of this other stuff started happening. And I was like, oh my goodness, we learned that there's a facility in Massachusetts where it's still perfectly legal to electrically shock disabled people. And
Wow.
I was heartbroken to read some of the testimony. And there are so many issues like that where if I wasn't following like 45 different disability rights groups at, all levels of government and all these little grassroots organizations that are doing so much work right now, I wouldn't know. And I realized something. I realized that if we don't go to the platforms that people use, like TikTok, like YouTube Shorts, like Instagram, like Facebook Reels, if we don't go to those platforms and explain what's going on, no one is going to know. And that's not something we can let slide right now. And so I do worry about where this is heading because I have seen, we've all seen a trend at the state level. We've seen services be denied, from education to, placing people in institutions where the treatment is horrific and has led to, really difficult to describe neglect and death. We see it at all levels now.
Last year, I had gone through some IEP training at National, and some of the things that and I get it, you're fighting just like when a labor union is going up against, a business owner for whatever it may be, higher wages, whatever the case may be, that you go back and forth, but some of the things that we talked about when doing an IEP that to me is common sense. If you are a sighted student, you're going to get grammar however many times a week you get grammar. I don't know what it is these days, but I'm willing to bet it's almost every day if it's not every day. And that a blind student has to fight to get Braille for an hour every week or two. And folks don't get that if you can't read, a perfect example is I was trying to email someone a couple of weeks ago, and I listened to his email address, and it started off WB3K. Well, it wasn't the letter K, it was 3 letters that sounded like a K when you pronounced it. So the email kept bouncing, and I'm thinking, I know this guy's email address. And a friend of mine thought Lyft, the rideshare company, was L-I-F-T. He had no idea it was L-Y-F-T. And on and on and on. Like Jim Antonacci always says, you'll learn spelling, you'll learn grammar. If you're listening, you have no idea about those things. And so as things get chipped away, whether it's in 504 in IEPs, and the fact that you have to battle for everything. And it's just, and I think the idea is, hey, let's wear these people down for whatever the case may be, whether it's the 504 challenge, and let's face it, there's almost unlimited money, I'm sure, that's going for the states against the line in 504. So how do you battle something like that when you are up against it?
Well, you gotta, think these attacks are happening in the shadows because, like I said before, everyone knows someone who is disabled. And the attorneys general, I would think, understand that this would affect people in their states, which is why, of course, the suit was done very discreetly. And we found out about it only, I think, 5 months after the initial complaint was dropped. That's how well they kept it hidden. But that's the thing. We can't let them keep it hidden because the pressure from the disabled community is what prompted them to say, okay, we can't go on, this, we can't go at this and say Section 504 in itself is unconstitutional. We have to try a different approach. They saw that we weren't going to stand for that. But America as a whole still didn't find out. I had the honor of interviewing with USA Today about it last year. And that was a great opportunity to kind of increase that exposure. But in large part, no one knew. I had so many people coming up to me who would see JL's TikToks and go, "Oh my God, I've seen the videos. I had no idea. My cousin's disabled. My mom's friend is disabled. My neighbor's disabled. And I had no idea." And that's what we need to fix. And that's the hole we're trying to fill right now is, in one of our videos, there was a circuit court ruling last year that really, really jeopardizes disabled voting rights in 7 states. And it has 160,000 views. And so many people were like, "Oh my goodness, I never knew. I did not know this was happening. This needs to be rectified. This is wrong." So we are trying to get the public to understand the magnitude of the threats we face. Because, and this is something I tell my members all the time. Judy's League is, we have a lot of members from all over the country. If America knew what was happening to disability rights, they would rise up and raise their voices. Our job is to make sure they find out and they find out quick.
So let's take a look at that. You said you have members. How is Judy's League structured? Is it a board plus members? How's it all structured and laid out?
Right. So we have a board of directors, and then we have several committees where people can join and, work on the various initiatives that we're concentrating on. So we have a social media committee, as might be expected. And so that's the committee that works on developing scripts, deciding how videos are going to be structured, what's the title, so many little decisions. What time, what day, right? Work with the algorithm. Then we've got the research committee. So they are in many ways the lifeblood of what we do because social media cannot write our scripts if we don't have our facts straight, if we don't have our ducks in a row. And so they're the ones that if we identify an issue, the research committee is the one that's going to brief us on the details of that issue. We have the governmental affairs task force. Right now, what they're trying to do is reach out to some attorneys general to see if they will file as interveners in the case of Texas v. Kennedy, which means Health and Human Services hasn't really defended 504 necessarily. And so, because they've been agreeing with the states, right? So we need someone to defend 504. Otherwise, the judge could just say, okay, well, if the states want this out and Kennedy wants this out, then boom, it's out, right? So we need someone to defend. So we're trying to convince attorneys general in some states to file as interveners. So that is what the Governmental Affairs Task Force is doing right now, trying to get that ball rolling there. And essentially just a lot of outreach at the state level at the moment. Then outreach, that's more of your reporters, your colleges and universities across the country with various disability student organizations, things like that to get people involved and to see if we can get some, coverage in publications that people will be reading. I also want to shout out our logistics crew. because they are the reason that we are able to do the things we do. IT, they are fantastic. So we're very, very lucky.
Is this an all volunteer group of folks that you're talking about?
Yes, we are filing for 501(c)(3) status in the very near future. And we're meeting with an advisor to kind of finalize the details because, truthfully, right, we formed in response to this very recent issue. So we're going to have a conversation with our membership and our board and our advisor about, like, okay, what does it look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? But right now, yes, we are volunteer.
How many people do you think all told are would consider themselves a member of the organization, either on one of those committees, task force, whatever? How many people you think?
I would say right now about 40. Tiny but mighty.
It's not nothing.
Tiny but mighty.
So at this point, you can't take donations, or can you?
We will be able to take donations very shortly. But
Okay.
as of today, we are waiting until we get that status. We're waiting until we incorporate at a state level because the way the timeline works, we're incorporating in the state of New Jersey. And when
Okay.
once we incorporate at the state level, we can take donations. But the federal process takes a little bit of time.
Right.
So we just need to get once the state process is done, then we can start taking donations.
Do you see yourself as you move forward? And I kind of think I know the answer to this. Is this something that when you are at law school, whether it's at Berkeley or the other dream school, do you see yourself this is an extracurricular for you that you continue with this, and at that point maybe you find some other folks that you're in law school with, that says, "Hey, I'd like to be part of that too," and then that you just build momentum that way?
Yeah, so, throughout law school and in my career, I do not wanna let this go, because this it was originally about 504, but this showed me just how many issues do not receive the attention that they need, and we need to fix that, and we need to fix it soon. So, although law school will be what occupies the bulk of my time, Judy's League will get any drop that I have left.
So you mentioned law school, and we've had a few folks on that have gone through law school, and some of the things that they've had to go through with accommodations. And to me, it's hard enough to keep up with everything if you're a sighted person, just to keep up with reading and everything else. Do you have something? Are you set up for success? Hey, I'm going to have these books, and these are available on whatever the case may be. I don't want to say Bookshare, but for lack of a better knowledge on my end, they're available on Bookshare. I can get them that way, so I can go through everything. Is that something that you think you're ready to battle with? Because I mean, you're not going to be the first blind lawyer I know. Just thinking about it now, a few that come right to mind. So obviously, they were able to do it, so I'm assuming you say, "Hey, those people can do it, so can I." Is that you set up for that?
Yeah, that's the mindset for sure. I'm going to be meeting with Berkeley's disability office shortly to go over what this looks like, right? Because I'm not familiar with the logistics of a 1L education, so I don't know entirely what I'm going to need yet. And every school wants different books to some extent. But I'm also working right now and training to devise a note taking system that is going to be most conducive to my success. So, because you have to brief or write briefs for the cases that you read. So I need to figure out if I'm cold called in class, which I will be because the law schools use the Socratic method. Um, I need to know how am I going to be able to access the part of the notes that will allow me to answer the rapid fire questions that I'm going to get. So is that hard copy braille with markup? Is that electronic? Is that a braille display connected to my computer? So we're working out what is going to be that dream system that's going to allow me to succeed in those lectures. But for accessing the materials, you do need some support from the disability office. So I'm going to work with them on that. I've heard wonderful things about Berkeley's disability office, which makes me excited because I know a federationist who had quite a different experience. And she's been outspoken about what can happen if things slip in that direction.
I'm sorry, when you said you'd be cold called in class, and I immediately thought of Legally Blonde,
Yep.
from and then that made me think, how would you like you answered, how would you get all that information so quickly? I just couldn't I couldn't imagine carrying around a whole bunch of hard copy braille, going from class to class. I mean, you wouldn't have to join the gym, but talking about law school again, the other dream law school, East Coast, West Coast.
East.
And are your folks pushing you to go to the East, or they want whatever you want?
They want me to do my research, understandably, right? Get a feel for the campus, talk to the disability office, get connected with the disability rights group on campus for either school, if there is one. I know Berkeley has one. I have to check on my dream school, the other one. But, as long as I have my T's and I's done, they're okay.
And I'm guessing Berkeley and the other school, I mean, obviously it's gonna be, I'm guessing, as prestigious as Berkeley, are going to have a wide net cast with alum that can get you in various places, and also what you're doing is almost governmental, so I'm guessing the Washington, DC area is gonna be, someplace that can you see yourself working out in the Berkeley area, or where are you hoping everything goes once you get through law school?
I mean, I can absolutely see myself working in the Berkeley area. It's kind of a sweet spot for disability rights work. There are a lot of firms out there. There are a lot of disability rights attorneys out there. And I would love to live in that space, truly. And I think I've kind of had it in the back of my head for a minute that, like, oh, that would be really cool to be in California and to kind of be in that center part of where all that stuff goes down. I could also see DC. I think that's definitely a possibility. There are even some great firms in Maryland. Shout out Brown Goldstein and Levy. Love you guys. Um, New York is a big one too, for the ACLU. My dream school is in New York. So I have thought about that there's some great firms near there. So I'm open, to wherever it ends up taking me.
And I should just point out, there is no relation between me and that law firm, and I did just meet Dan Goldstein is his name, right? Is
Yeah,
Goldstein
yeah,
part of that?
yeah.
I met him in wherever the NFB conference was last year, New Orleans, on the elevator,
Oh, no
and
way.
and he said, "Hey, I have your same last name." I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, and we shook hands. He introduced himself. I said, "Oh, okay, you're the law firm." And he said, "Yeah." And we talked for a minute or two, and one of us got off the elevator. Is there anything about Judy's League that you'd like to tell me that I didn't ask you about?
The thing I really love most about what we're cultivating is that it's very member driven. So every month we do town halls where every committee will explain what we've been up to. We give some member shout outs, right, for the wonderful work that they're all doing. But then once our information has been presented, we open it up for a complete Q&A, right? What do you want to know? What comments do you have? What issues in the disability rights space do you want us to be working on that maybe we haven't identified or haven't prioritized? Because that's also the hard part too, is there's so many things that we want to cover. And so figuring out, we only have so many people and so much time. So sometimes we can't cover everything, and those are some difficult decisions. But we had a member in January that was like, hey, the fact that Braille training grants are getting cut, that's really important. It's Braille Literacy Month. Please, make that a big priority. And we were like, absolutely, we hear you. And the board was totally behind him, and we got that video out. So that is one of the things I love most about JL, is that we are really member focused, and I always want my members to feel like, I'm going to be in the trenches with them. I don't want to come off as, kind of a disconnected leader. I don't want any of our board to come off like, we're just up in the penthouse, right? Like, we want to be in there, in this with them. We all identify as disabled, every single one of us, right? And some have multiple disabilities, myself included. And so we are in there, and we are fighting right with them.
That's one of the things that is difficult, where there's only so many resources you have and so many people that you've got to pick your battles, and I get that with so many things anymore, but that is good that you realize that, and I wish you the best of luck with Judy's League, and obviously we will be following along. Before I let you go, I do have to ask you one more thing, NFB related actually, and tell us about the song. How did that all come about? How did you wrote it, is that right?
I
The
co-wrote it.
lyrics?
I co-wrote.
Okay.
Yeah. So it came out. The Performing Arts Division did this little initiative about songwriting, and I signed up. Tim Elder signed up, and I was like, "This would be really cool." And so we were interviewed by the president, and we kind of got to the next round. And so we went to the Jernigan Institute in, I believe, October of 24. Uh, there was a lot of people from national that helped us out. So I think the ones on the name were Chris Danielson, President Riccobono, and Jesse Sherrick. But Tim and I really did the melodic line, and we got the lyrics written for. It's called "Who Are We NFB." And we had a lot of amazing, super valuable insight from the other people that were there too, about, because we wanted to capture the essence of the Federation and the issues that we're working on. And so Jesse was incredible for that. And President Riccobono gave us, I think, a quote from Scott LaBar to put in, which I was so appreciative of. And Chris Danielson was fantastic in every way, as he always is. So we wrote two songs that weekend. The other song, I think, we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do with that one, how it's going to look. But we wrote that. And then I went into the studio in New York in January to record it. And Tim and a wonderful team of blind engineers did all of the technical know-how that I can't even begin to comprehend.
Kaleigh, I really appreciate you joining me today and talking about Judy's League, and I wish you the best of luck with everything, and fingers are crossed that you get into your other dream school and you have a tough decision to make, East Coast, West Coast. And it'll be nice to see you in New York if you're there, because I'm in New York pretty frequently. But thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks again to Kaleigh for stopping by and giving us all that information on Judy's League. The links to their website and social media platforms are down below. And if you are going to Washington seminar, you know about the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Section 504, because that was part of our talking points. And I know a lot of folks had to cancel their trips to Washington because of that crazy snow. And believe me, the snow was unbelievable. The front of the hotel wasn't plowed the whole time we were there. So the folks who didn't make it, I know it was disappointing, but it was not easy, and all but one of our meetings were virtual anyway. But we talked about 504 even still as we have these meetings with our congressional representatives that we've had since then, if we didn't get to meet with them while we were in Washington. So check out all of the Washington seminar information on the NFB site, nfb.org/Washington-seminar, and you'll see some of the talking points, especially, as Kaleigh was mentioning, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Thanks again to her. Good luck to her in law school. I hope she does have a difficult decision whether she stays on the East Coast, heads out west to Berkeley. Good luck to her. And as far as the song goes, I have a link down below that sends you to Spotify so you can listen to the song there. It is available on a boatload of music sites. Now, when I was looking for it, I did a Google search, couldn't find it. I didn't find it on the NFB site, but President Riccobono set me straight and gave me a laundry list of places where you can find it, as well as the link to the song on Spotify. So I've included that in the show notes. So check it out if you haven't heard it. It does get folks charged up when it's played in our settings, whether it's Washington seminar or national convention. If you've got questions, comments, show ideas, whatever you would like to tell us, please reach out. whitecanesconnect@gmail.com. That's whitecanesconnect@gmail.com. You can also leave a voicemail. Give us a call at 267-338-4495. Please leave your name and town if you do leave a message. You have up to 3 minutes, but remember your name and town if you do call in. Again, 267-338-4495. 4495. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of White Canes Connect. Take care.